Like sometimes people are like, "You chose to be trans. I didn't choose to be trans. I wake up every day wishing that I wasn't trans. This is not something that's fun. Like I would not wish this on my worst enemy. It's not something. But I just making the best of my life, trying to be as happy as I can. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and I think that that is a really
Mhm.
good point because
Mhm.
you hear about trans joy.
Joy, or I'm proud to be trans. I am not proud to be trans. If I could wake up one day and not be trans, I would take it absolutely. I don't care if that was meant that I was gonna be happy in a boy body or happy in like a woman's body. I don't care as long I do not want to be trans, but here I am.
Cassie, thank you so much for joining today and coming on Voices with Vicky to talk to me. I really appreciate it. Our conversations so far have been awesome, and I just really wanted to have you come on and get your voice heard and get you out there.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Cassie. I have a YouTube channel called Cassie Speaks Up. At the current moment, I am just over 30 days starting YouTube. I'm a transsexual woman, and I started my channel because I saw so many things going on inside of the trans community that I did not agree with. And most of my life, I just wanted to assimilate and be invisible and just blend in. But I keep on seeing these trans rights activists and trans community keep on overstepping on boundaries, and there's no one actually speaking up, and they're just going further and further and further. So I felt I had to step up and voice my opinion.
How have things been going so far since you've actually, come out on the internet and voiced some of these opinions that you have? Have you gotten a lot of backlash? Has it been positive, negative? Where does that stand?
It's been positive and negative. It's been very positive in the sense that I found out that some people that I thought would have a big issue with it actually are kind of seeing things the same way, but they're also afraid to speak out about it and just kind of like keep things quiet. And it's also been negative because there's been some people, especially in the trans community, that have completely like disowned me and everything like that, and I've been kicked out of a lot of like support groups that I've been in because I've essentially gone against the grain about some things that I just not okay.
What is it, do you think, with LGBT in general that leads people to believe or to think that this is just one big monolith? You're saying that you're going against the grain. Like, why are you not allowed to have a certain opinion, and you have to like what's the cause of that, do you think?
Honestly, if I have to pinpoint it, I think it's the fact that people can't meet in the middle anymore. They have to be right about everything, and they can't actually agree to disagree. And they take things way too personally. And they
Mm.
think that if you do one little thing differently, then you are the enemy.
Do you think that the T should be dropped or separated from the LGB?
Um, Honestly, I can understand why the T, well, people from the LGB want to be divorced from the T, and honestly, as part of the T, I want to divorce from it myself. So I think it should be.
Yeah, I have a lot of mixed feelings about it.
Mhm.
At one point, I was very hardline, like,
Mhm.
nope, it's got to be
Mhm.
separated. It's not the same thing as being gay. It's not
Mhm.
sexual orientation.
Mhm.
Me, and it's not to say that I wouldn't support my trans friends. It's
Mhm.
just it's a separate, isolated issue.
Mhm.
The problems that come up with it, the experiences that you have are kind of different than sexual
Yeah.
orientation. I mean, yeah, you can draw some similarities and
Mhm.
that kind of thing, but I used to be very hardlined about it, but I have mixed feelings about it because it's like it's always been a part of the community for since
Mhm.
I remember, anyways, and it
Mhm.
wasn't a big deal. It really wasn't, and now it's become a big deal because the envelope has been pushed so far, and it's
Mhm.
alienated the gays and lesbians and bisexuals, and they're like, I can't deal with this anymore. Like, why are you forcing this and this? and
Mhm.
and I think a lot of transsexual people feel the same way too. But so that's why I'm also like, I understand like that there's people that are in the community that know better, and that
Yeah.
they're not all trans people are part of the problem. It's
Mhm.
these to me, it's just these really loud activist types that are the issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the underlying problem.
When I talk to people about like, cause I have like I'm on TikTok as well, and I go into these like TikTok lives and have these debates with people, and they all come on there thinking that I'm gonna be this like raging lunatic. just because I'm a
Yeah.
trans person. And I'm telling them like, no, those are just the very loud ones online, and they're the ones that the media focuses on. Like most of us are actually pretty calm. So yeah. And about LGBT, we got lesbian, gays, and bis, which is stuff about sexual orientations, and trans doesn't have anything to do with sexual orientations.
When did you start your transition?
Medically, I started in July of 2013. So, and I went through a really hardship. It was a couple years later that had nothing to do with being trans, and I kind of like temporarily detransitioned for a few years, and then I came back.
Okay, gotcha.
But the first time I came out to someone, it was back in fourth grade at a Christian school, back
Yeah.
in the 90s. And the first time I talked to a family member about it was actually 1999. So it was a different era then.
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of always felt since you
Mhm.
were a young person that you knew something was different, or you knew
Mhm. Yeah.
that you didn't. What can you describe that feeling or that thought process?
When I was really, really young, I didn't have the language for it. I didn't have the normal upbringing, especially when it came to like language access. So, but the best way I can describe it is things just not feeling right inside. It was like now I can say it was like an incongruence, but I just always associated like, hey, I should be like this, I should be like that, or I felt like this, and especially when puberty started, that's when it really kicked in, and I was just like this. But then I had conversation with someone in my family, and they were telling me things, and I got kind of like pushed back in into like shoving it down, and didn't transition until way later. And then, like in high school, I came out to a couple friends, and then I got told like constantly like you're never pass anything like that, and I was scared to death about like whether or not
Yeah.
I would pass, how the world would perceive me, like if I was going to be like harmed, or if or people were going to harm me, whatever. So it really terrified me. And in 2013, I came to like a crossroads where I
Mhm.
was just like, hey, I can't continue to live my life this way. And I don't mean this in like a suicidal idolization or whatever. But I feel like I just had to do something because I was just like, I can't live like this. So then I confided into some of my closest friends, and they encouraged me to go see a therapist, which was the right process to do in the first place. Then
Right.
I actually went to that therapist and went through months and months and months of therapy. But when I went into this therapist, I wasn't there just to get like a hormone letter or whatever. I told the therapist, I was like, hey, I feel like this, I have this problem, and I want transition to be the very last resort. And it ended up being the last resort. So.
Yeah, and I kind of feel that
Mhm.
that's the way it used to be.
Mhm.
And so in my perspective and in my experience with trans people, it
Mhm.
used to be that, okay, when somebody said they were trans, like, you knew they were really actually trans because there's no
Mhm.
way that they could have gone through all those gatekeeping steps and
Mhm.
been faking it or doing it for nefarious
Mhm.
reasons, or you
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so when somebody said they were trans, it was like dead serious, you know? And it it was a big deal in that way, but then it wasn't a big deal because it was like, okay, well, this person's gonna transition and they're gonna do their thing and they're gonna go on with their
Mhm.
life, and that's that.
Mhm.
So, and the whole idea of it was that you want to pass as the opposite sex,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And I think at some point, what happened was they started to say, when I say they, I'm talking activists, lobbyist groups, whatever, started
Mhm.
saying things like, no, you're fine. You don't have to pass. Passing isn't really the goal. And it started to go down this little avenue of self ID, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And now everyone's trans. It must really upset you that
It
it's
does
come.
upset me, yeah. That's one of the reasons why, two main reasons why I wanted to speak up was because of all like the nonsense going on about anything can be trans, and also trying to medically transition kids. Those are the two main ones that really irk me a lot. They've trans community has made being trans such a I don't know. It used to be like one way, but now it seems like what is trans? Like what is it?
It's confusing the masses,
Yeah,
actually.
so
People don't
polluted
even
right
know what it
now.
is anymore.
Yeah, it's so
And then
polluted.
they went on with this
Hmm.
non-binary thing. And
Hmm.
again, that's just a self-identification. Nobody is born non-binary. You
Yeah.
know, that's to me, that's androgynous. And
Mhm.
it's a new fancy word for androgynous, and it's not a big deal, but everybody's making everything a big deal, and like that your
Mhm.
identity is like up here and it's the number one thing and you have to talk about it all the time and you have to
Mhm.
constantly be wearing this badge of honor of LGBT this and LGBT that. And
Mhm.
it's kind of ruined it for me because it used to be just like Pride, for example. It
Mhm.
used to be fun. It used to be like, that couple weekends out of June when, you'd go to the Pride parade and you'd be like with a whole bunch of other gay people and you're like, "Oh wow, it's very, gay identified," or whatever.
Mhm.
And it was fun and you marched in the parade and you had some beers and you went home. Now, half the people there aren't even gay or trans or we don't even know what they are. There's this queer thing now.
Yeah.
The usage of that word, I don't really like it. I think that it's sort of um it was always used as an insult.
It used to be,
So
yeah.
I don't really understand like where that the emergence of that word all of a sudden it's positive.
Mhm.
And I, I don't appreciate it when people call me that all the time. Well, you're a queer this, you're a queer that, and I'm
What is
like,
queer? What is queer? Like you ask people what is queer, and they're like, I don't
yeah,
know.
no, they don't. I mean,
Yeah.
they people go around and try to
Mhm.
ask people like at these parades
Mhm.
and stuff, like, hey,
Yeah.
what's this mean? And they can't really put their finger on it. It means something different to each person, so it
Mhm.
really has no meaning.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the other thing that I try to explain to people about, like, my sexuality, for example, like, it's just one thing about who I am. It it's not everything that I am, and it makes me uncomfortable that people place that on me as
Mhm.
being everything I am, and the next thing you know it, they're like, "Oh, well, you have, you know, um, homophobia." What do they call it? Internalized homophobia.
I get the same thing, internalized transphobia. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, "No, I really don't." I've been out
Mhm.
since I was in my late teens.
Mhm.
I'm married, happily married, been with I've been out my whole life, my whole adult life, and I've always walked the world basically, everybody knew. So how am I what's the phobia? What am I so afraid of? And people can't answer that question when I push back and say, "What is it that's making you think that I'm phobic because I don't
Mhm.
agree with you, because I don't want kids to transition, because I don't believe in all these labels and acronyms and baloney that they've thrown at the wall, and
Mhm.
pansexual this and this sexual that and this that,
Mhm.
and then there's all these flags and all this. It's overwhelming
Yeah.
and it's unnecessary. And I think it's very confusing for young people. It's making it harder for them to figure out who they are, not easier. Remember when labels were not cool? Remember when it was like, don't label
Yeah.
me?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want labels. I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier, but I'm profoundly deaf in one ear, and
Mhm.
even growing up, like I didn't want to be labeled as like that deaf kid, and I didn't want to be labeled as what that kid or this kid. I just wanted to be like just me, and not have people like see me as like something different. Like I didn't want to attach these labels, but it seems like these days everyone wants a label. They want to collect them all, like Pokemon Go or something. So I've talked to some trans people and told them like, hey, like trans is not my entire identity. Yes, it's a part of my identity, but it's not going to be like my main identity. And I'm not going to go out
Right.
there and make every single life decision or political decision or decision about everything in my life to be about trans. And I've had some people who are gay and like they would be gay and they talk to another gay person and that the first gay person would be like, hey, like I'm not proud to be gay. I'm just gay. It's just part of who I am. And then the other person would get so offended because
Right, you're not proud
yeah,
of it. That means you
yeah,
must be having a problem. You must have internalized
hmm,
homophobia. And
yeah,
yeah, the pride thing is weird.
hmm,
I think if I were to say I was proud of something, I'm proud of the fact that we're able to walk the world freely, at least in America
hmm,
and maybe a few other countries. We can walk freely. We've fought for those rights to not be discriminated against, to be able to get married, to have workplace rights, adoption rights, things of that nature. And I'm proud of that. That we've managed to achieve a
hmm,
lot for
Mhm.
people and more widespread acceptance more than ever, despite what, MSNBC wants to try to convince people of. I don't feel special,
Mhm.
and I don't feel that I should feel special, if that makes sense.
It does
I
make
mean,
sense, yeah.
I guess everyone's special. It's to me the way I see it. It's like everybody's special or no one's special. Like
Mhm.
everyone's unique. So it's kind of like I don't know. I just have never felt this. Maybe when I was a teenager, because when you're first coming out and you're first having these experiences, you
Mhm.
do feel this sense of pride or something. You're like, because you're figuring it out.
Mhm.
But you get to be a certain age, and I'm pushing 40 now, and I do not view things the way I did 20 years ago.
Mm.
Uh, and things were also different 20 years ago. Things were actually
Absolutely.
harder. Some people like to argue that the reason we're in the spot that we're in now with transing kids and
Mhm.
with all this other stuff with, trans women and women's sports, et cetera, all that is because of same sex marriage. I actually did a video on it.
I actually ended up watching a few of your videos, and I remember hearing about that. Like that was like the little crumb of the rest of the story that led to it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
People have said that to me on
Mhm.
numerous occasions
Mhm.
that they blame same-sex marriage for all the woke ideology, and I'm like, "What?"
Everyone wants to point the finger at someone. So like one person might say it's a trans person's fault, then the trans person be like, "Oh, it's not my fault. It's that person's fault." And that person be like,
Yeah.
"It didn't start with us. It started with them." So
Right, right,
yeah.
and I think that's always the finger pointing is
Mhm.
never gonna stop.
Mhm.
I don't think, unfortunately, but my thing, and I think you and I both agree about this, is the trans kid thing is just taking it too far, and they're scaring the crap out of people. They're scaring the crap out of these children now that Trump is
Mhm.
going to be in office again,
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
convincing them that they're gonna be killed. I just saw a thing on
Mhm.
CNN about it. I'll run the clip.
Concerns have you had about speaking out?
That I'm gonna be like murdered. Like one day I'm gonna be walking down the street and somebody's gonna come up and like shoot me or something.
That's a really scary thing to be worrying about at 10 years old.
Yeah, that should not be a worry.
Michelle, what's going through your mind as you hear your daughter say this?
It's just hard to hear her say that. And she asked me three questions after she heard who won the election. Are we going to have to move? Are they going to take me away from you? And am I not going to be able to get my medicine? It's frightening.
We've seen Republicans put a lot of money and energy into transgender issues. More than $200 million were spent this election cycle in anti-trans ads. What does that feel like to have so much attention by all these politicians on your identity?
It makes me feel like they think we're puppets that they can play with, and it's just so wrong.
It made you feel disrespected?
Made me feel like literally dead inside. It's probably honestly the worst thing I've ever felt. I've heard transphobic politicians that say, no, you have the wrong gender, you're confused, honey. No, myself is a fact, not an opinion. And they don't get to decide that for me. I get to decide that for myself.
Somebody's putting that in their head.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
I don't see it any other way. And then
Mhm.
these parents are sitting there and they're crying, like they're standing behind them crying as they're telling the
Mhm.
interviewer, and
It looks staged to me. I'm sorry. It looks staged.
it looked a little bit over the top. And
Mhm.
it actually really ticked me off when I first saw it. I was a little bit
Mhm.
angry because I was like, these poor
Mhm.
kids, like,
Yeah.
just leave them alone. Like, you've
Mhm.
already convinced them that they're the opposite sex when
Mhm.
they're prepubescent children. Like,
Mhm.
how would you I mean, I understand that kids, young people, like you and I both probably knew, like you said, you knew when you were pretty young,
Very
but
good.
you knew, but you didn't know. I think a lot of
Mhm.
it's hindsight, right? As you grow up into adult, you're like, oh, so that's why I felt like that as a
Mhm.
kid, or that's why I
Mhm.
was thinking that.
Yeah.
And that's how I look at it too for myself. Like, people always ask me, did you always know you were gay? And I'm like, well, I always knew I was different. I knew there was something off.
Mm-hmm.
And as I grew into myself and I hit puberty and started
Mm-hmm.
having attraction, I noticed it and was like, is this normal? Like, I didn't know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I also was a tomboy. I've always been a tomboy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said that if I was growing up in today's times, I would have thought I was trans.
Well, probably, yeah. I've heard that a lot about tomboys, even on online socials and debates and stuff like that. Yeah, I always hear,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, if you're a tomboy in this day and era, you're trans."
Yeah. Yeah. And that would have been a disaster if I had really gone down that road. Isn't that a sort of a form of conversion therapy if you're looking at it from that standpoint? I mean, what do you think?
I think it is a kind of conversion therapy. I do think that someone who is trans should never look at it like, oh, I'm attracted to that person, so I need to transition. I actually had someone I knew really, really well actually come to me and came out to me like, hey, I'm trans. And the very first thing that I asked was like, hey, why? Because I was generally curious because everyone has these different answers. Sometimes people think they're trans and they're not. And the very first thing out of this person's mouth was, I want to do it because my spouse wants me to. So I'm just like, a lot of people come into these things because they want to do it for sexual reasons, or are they doing it for someone else? And I have a sense that what you just told me about wanting to do it because, oh, I like girls, for instance, so I'm trans or whatever. I'm just like, no, I can't see it that way.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah.
so radical. And with not having any sort of gatekeeping within the medical community, you can just do what you want, essentially.
Yeah.
Because
They're
there's
they're trying to get rid of therapy. They're trying to get rid of like gatekeeping, and the gatekeeping is just a I don't know, clickbaity word, for instance, for safeguards. They don't want to say, oh, we're getting rid of safeguards. That would look really bad for their message. But yeah, they want to get rid of therapy. Now you can there's something called informed consent, where you can go and get your letter right away. There's places online, for instance, like the Gallup, for instance, where you just show up, not like show up, you go on there, email the person and do like one session with them. You can get your surgery letters, your hormone letters, whatever you need.
Well, and the problem is in the detransition rate is very quickly and rapidly spiking. And yet we've still got people out there in denial saying, oh, they're not real, or they're being paid to say these things, or they're a grifter and this and that. And it's so disgusting and dehumanizing to me to put these people down that went down this path that is extremely dangerous, that has no safeguards, like you said. And they thought they were trans. It turns out they weren't. They've got permanent damage from testosterone use, or they got irreversible surgeries that they mutilated themselves somehow, and now they can't go back. They can't, and there's no one there to help them. Who's helping these people? I think a lot of it's just a pipeline, and it's about money, and that is extremely scary to me that we've ended up in this place.
Always follow the money. Always follow the money. Even when it comes to medicalizing children as well, when it comes to being trans, follow the money.
Oh, that's exactly what it is. It's a lifetime of medicalization and lots of money there. These kids are, I think we've got a whole generation of kids now that really don't know who they are. They're mentally ill because they went down this road and they didn't need to. They weren't dealing with the issues that they actually had. So if they had body dysmorphia, or if they had depression or anxiety, or they were SA'd in some way, there's all these other reasons that could make you think maybe that you were trans, but they're not addressing those things first. They're just saying, here's your hormones. They're changing the physical before they're trying to address the mental.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. They're just trying to loop up a whole bunch of different like disorders, psychological problems, or anything, and just make it out like trans. And sometimes I think people think that, oh, if I transition, I can become this, and all my problems are going to go away. And then they actually go down that route, and then later on they find out, oh crap, I still have all these problems. They followed me.
Somebody needs to be held accountable at some point for this stuff. And I think it starts with these therapists and the doctors, because even the therapists and the doctors are sometimes convincing parents that this is the right thing to do. And they're scaring them and emotionally manipulating them by saying that if you don't do this, your child's going to unalive themselves.
Yeah. Oh, I hate it when they give the parents like, hey, you can transition your kid, or they're gonna unalive themselves, and I hate it. Like they're always like, those are the two extremes. There's nothing else you can do in here.
Cassie, tell me what your goal is for Cassie Speaks Up. What do you envision?
Down the road, I envision to be able to talk about like women's sports, children transitioning, talk about a lot of things that the trans rights activists or TRAs are doing that are really. This is a really loaded word, but essentially hijacking the trans community to make it be like they're just taking over everything. They haven't just taken over like the trans community, but literally like the whole like LGBT thing. And eventually to be able to interview people and debate people as well, and pretty much just bring light to like, hey, this is what like trans people are. This is what trans people, like transsexual people, are about, and so that it's not just like a one-sided story of like these trans rights activists that people see just like pushing us down and making us feel like we're invisible and making us like afraid to stand up. And hopefully I can join others as well and have a lot of us like actually stand up as well and speak out about it.
So as far as what's happening in the trans community right now, or LGBT, or however you want to look at it, what is the biggest thing? And I know the child to transition thing is heavy on your mind. Like, do you think that the whole idea of it is bad, or do you think that children might be able to transition on a social level and just not a medical level, or do you think the whole thing is not appropriate?
In the current landscape, I would have to absolutely say do not transition medically the kids. If there was a way that we could separate being trans and all like it being like a social gathering or being like cool or whatever, and get rid of that, and trans is no longer about like being like in the group or whatever, then I would start opening up this dialogue again. And if we could actually be like accurately be like, yeah, this person's trans, this person's not. But as a minor, like I don't see that happening, but there was a way, maybe. But for social transitions, I think that before someone just jumps on the train with their child and be like, yeah, we're going to social transition, I do think that they need to go see like a mental health professional and a therapist that specializes in not just like being in transgendered kids or transsexual minors, whatever, but also specializes in minors and knows exactly how things are going on, because parents usually have no idea what it's like to have trans or gender dysphoria, whatnot. So they have to go to someone who is actually like specialized in this. And I've heard stories about these minors that like one day they go by she, her, the next week it's like he, him, and then it's some like neo pronoun or whatever, like Z and Zer or whatever, and they keep switching back and forth. And like whenever I see that, like I know there's a problem. There's something not being addressed properly there. So, but when I break it down, it's really, really hard. I like social transition overall. I think it's not a problem as long as it's done correctly and it's consistent. And otherwise, like, I don't know. Other than that, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. It sure is. I think that having a child understand what their biology is important. So if a child says, hey, I think I'm a boy when they're a girl, or vice versa, it's like, okay, well, maybe you think that, but remember, you are biologically one or the other. And hey, if you want to wear boy clothes, or you want to, wear a dress or whatever, go ahead, let them play, let them explore in that way. But I don't know that it should be reinforced to the point where they're changing names and changing pronouns and getting that deep into it, because then you're reinforcing a dysphoria that might resolve itself as they grow up. That's kind of why I'm a little bit cautious about taking it too far, even socially. What does it mean to feel like a boy or to feel like a girl when you're not? I mean, you're in the belief that having dysphoria and all that is a mental disorder?
Yes, it's definitely a mental disorder. I know people will always be like, oh, it got out of the DSM-5. It's literally a mental disorder. It's in your head. It's not just something that you just like wake up one day like, hey, I'm trans.
What do you think about it being taken out of the DSM?
When I think about it being taken out of the DSM, I think it has more to do with like how people view trans people. They're like, oh, they're a disorder, and they try to use it to like push them down. And honestly, if they keep down this route, I don't understand. Like, because if it's no longer a disorder, then why should insurance pay for it? Like, if they keep going down this route. So
I wonder the same thing. And
Mhm.
I've talked to other trans people that have said the
Mhm.
same exact thing, and that
Yeah.
they've kind of screwed themselves in a way, because eventually
Mhm.
I think pharmaceuticals and stuff are going to either abandon it
Mhm. Yeah.
or say that you can't, and they'll use whatever excuse they want to
Mhm.
use once it's not making them
Mhm.
money. This affirmation thing, I think it's more should be confirmation instead of affirmation. You really need to confirm something like that, and
Mm.
before you take them down this road, because
Absolutely.
this whole thing, this lie that's being told that this is reversible. I mean, maybe more reversible for some than others, depending on if you took hormones and how much of it you took and how
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, like, especially, I really am worried for women that go down this path, and that's not really who they are, because of what testosterone does to your body and what
Mhm.
it does to your reproductive system, and how it changes you. And you basically eventually go sterile. You get atrophy from it. Buck Angel had atrophy,
Yeah. He
and
was
so it's
Buck Angel almost died from it because they like the doctor at the time didn't even know what was going on, and like he almost died. He's been very vocal about it.
yeah. And I think that that's a really good thing, that to speak up about this stuff, because
Mhm.
there are risks associated, and you have to be willing to accept those risks and understand what they are and how that it could impact your life, and weigh the pros and cons about whether or not this is really something that you should do. And like you said, going back to earlier, that it was a last resort.
Like sometimes people are like, "You chose to be trans. I didn't choose to be trans. I wake up every day wishing that I wasn't trans. This is not something that's fun. Like I would not wish
Mhm.
this on my worst enemy. It's not something. But I just making the best of my life, trying to be as happy as I can. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and I think that that is a really
Mhm.
good point, because
Mhm.
you hear about trans joy.
Joy, or I'm proud to be trans. I am not proud to be trans. If I could wake up one day and not be trans, I would take it absolutely. I don't care if that was meant that I was gonna be happy in a boy body or happy in like a woman's body. I don't care as long I do not want to be trans, but here I am.
Yeah, and I think that's really profound,
Mhm.
and because the message that's going out to the masses is the
Mhm.
opposite.
Yeah.
It's that this is cool, this is fun, this should be
Mhm.
celebrated, and more people should be doing it, like,
Should not be
you know?
celebrating something that's like it's mentally really hard for me to go about like my day every day and be like, yeah, I'm proud, because then like I do that, I out myself, and that just gives me dysphoria. And I know that might be a little bit of a contradiction, seeing how I'm coming on YouTube now,
Mhm.
but
But you feel like you have
yeah,
to in order
yeah,
to stop the
hmm
madness. And that's
hmm
something that brings me, to my next, question about all of this.
hmm
When you made that decision, was that in and of itself a very dysphoric thing to, publicize yourself on the internet and say, "Hi, I'm Cassie, I'm a trans woman," and, that must have been a hurdle.
It was a hurdle coming on and be like, yes, I'm a trans woman, and I knew that I was going to out myself, and forever that I was going to be on the internet. And if my channel ever grows to like a sizable amount, I know that like people might be recognize me on the streets. But if I go back in history, like even back in like 2008, when I was going to like support groups, I would be seeing people. I was like, I don't actually like click with these people. And then when I first started getting ready for my medical transition in 2013, I was that kind of person. I think a lot of trans people would relate. They go online and especially YouTube, and they look up like before and after pictures just to see like what's possible. And then I found out some other like really influential people online. I kept on be like, um, they don't represent me. They don't represent me. They don't represent me. And
Mhm.
and then fast forward even a few more years up to like now, it's just like uh I have to speak up. I know I'm gonna out myself doing it, but like I can't let this go on no more. I have to speak up, and if that means that I have to out myself to the world for the rest of my life, so be it.
The vast majority of us just wanna live our lives, and we're
Mhm.
not interested in bathroom debates. We're not interested in, should kids transition or not. It's like, to me, this stuff is very, very, common sense.
Mhm.
It's common sense that,
Mhm.
kids shouldn't be doing this. Kids shouldn't even be
Mhm.
thinking about stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the bathroom debate, I have to tell you, again, it used to not be a big deal, man. I
Yeah.
remember the days when a trans woman, and I knew she was trans, would be in the bathroom with me, and I knew she was just there to do her freaking business and get out.
Mhm.
And now it's this whole big, like, it blows my mind, Cassie, that it's even a debate and it's in the Supreme Court. The activists made the bathroom issue a problem.
I've already talked about it on my channel before. Like in 2013, obviously, like I wasn't passing whatsoever. I completely 100% looked like a typical man, and I didn't on like day number one go, oh, I'm a woman, I'm entitled to this space. I actually like let the hormones do the work. And then the following year, I used to work for a company. I won't disclose which company it is, but I had to go and do inspections at pools all the way up and down the like in the Virginia, Maryland, DC. I went up to Massachusetts, and I had two options. There weren't really unisex bathrooms back then that had access that went all the way to the pools. I could either go in the men's or I could go in the women's. And I remember early on in my transition, I thought that like wearing more makeup and caking it on was the best thing to do because I didn't have that guidance and I looked like a literal clown. And I would go into the bathroom with my mannequin, with my binder for the inspection, and looking like a clown. Obviously, it didn't pass. My hair was probably like down to here. And I had some extensions that were in my hair that weren't blended well. And people look at me and give me a double take, but they'd be like, "Oh, that person's trans," and then they're like, "Okay, they're not a threat." But now I got these people that are going into these bathrooms that are like full beard, and I'm just like, and it's a self-identification thing. Like sometimes they're like these women in the bathrooms are probably going, "Is this really a trans person or is this a predator?" And they're doing like a threat analysis because like in this day and era, a cross-dresser could identify as trans just on the spot, like anything whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's a free for all, and that's
Mhm.
I can understand why women have a problem with that. I
Mhm.
really do,
Yeah.
and that they feel that their privacy is being invaded. I
Mhm.
mean, women had to fight for women's only spaces. That didn't just happen.
Yeah.
Same thing with women's sports. That's still a
Mhm.
struggle, and now
Mhm.
they're trying to say that trans women should be in women's sports, and it's like
Yeah.
I don't really understand the logic other than they think that the identity plays the sport and not the body. And that's just not correct. I
The
mean, duh.
identity does not play the sport. I actually transitioned on a swim team, so I remember those days. I even had this like internal conflict and debate with myself. I even go on like Facebook, like asking questions. Is like, am I cheating? Am I doing this because like I really wanted to be included in my sport? I really wanted to swim and be included, but at the other side, I was just like, is it unfair? Because I was like, yes, I have all of these advantages and stuff like that. And then I listened to like the trans community going, "Oh, you're fine. You didn't have all the advantages. You lost all your muscles." So I was just like, "Okay." I still did not compete at the time, but I remember swimming. I ended up swimming with the same men, the same women, the same pool throughout my transition from before hormones and through like the first like couple years, and I did not slow down that much whatsoever. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you go through male puberty,
Mhm.
your wingspan is,
Yeah.
longer. Your muscle mass is, even though you're taking estrogen, you
Mhm.
still have more because of the male
Mhm.
puberty.
Mhm.
Your heart size, your lung size, your
Mhm.
lung capacity, all those things play a role in competitive sports and the physical, what you can
Mhm.
cannot do and how far you
Mhm.
can take it. And of
Mhm.
course, women are not built like men.
Mhm.
And so even though, you went on hormones and you went through the transition period, it
Mhm.
still is an
Mhm.
advantage. Cassie, thanks so much for being here and coming to speak with me. And, I really hope to have you on again. And maybe I can even be on your platform.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I would love to be on have you on my platform, and I really appreciate being here. Thank you so much.